There's a kind of prayer that does not shake heaven. It commands attention from heaven. It is not a cry of desperation, but a declaration of authority. It is the kind of prayer that awakens what has been hidden, shifts what has been delayed, and silences every voice that says, "It cannot be done." This prayer carries so much power that through history forces have tried to bury it, twist it, or make believers forget its strength. But what heaven has released cannot be erased by men. Many pray from a place of weakness, but this prayer flows from a place of identity and victory. It is not about convincing God to move. It's about aligning with what He has already established. When a believer speaks this way, the unseen world responds. Chains begin to loosen, circumstances bow, and breakthroughs are set in motion. This is why it has been resisted, not because it is powerless, but because it is too powerful. Faith is the key that unlocks this dimension. If prayer is the vessel, then faith is the wind that drives it forward. When you pray with confidence, heaven doesn't just listen, heaven responds. It is written that the righteous shall live by faith, not by fear. Fearful prayers are like whispers lost in the wind, but faith-filled declarations are like thunder in the spirit realm. This prayer declares, "It is finished." It stands on the ground that victory has already been secured. It does not plead for light. It commands darkness to flee. It does not ask for permission. It enforces the will of the King. Every time this truth is rediscovered, destinies are restored, healing flows like a river, and divine provision breaks forth. The reason this prayer was opposed is simple. It exposes the enemy's weakness. When a person understands that they have authority, they stop bowing to fear and start standing on the Word. They stop waiting for miracles and start walking in them. Heaven's power is not locked away. It is released through those who believe and speak boldly. And now, this forgotten power is returning to the lips of those who are ready. This is not the hour to pray like victims. This is the time to speak like victors. When this prayer is spoken with faith, doors that have been closed for years will swing open. Healing that was delayed will manifest. Peace that was lost will return. This is not because of who we are, but because of who He is and what He has already accomplished. So rise up in faith. Let your prayer echo with authority. Let your words shake the ground beneath every limitation. They tried to silence this prayer, but they could not erase it. It still stands. It still works. And when you speak it in faith, heaven moves and the impossible bows. There are prayers that carry ordinary words, and then there are prayers that carry power so great that time, tradition, and even systems of religion tried to bury them beneath layers of doubt, fear, and silence. Yet they could never truly erase them, because what is born of divine authority can never be destroyed by human effort. This kind of prayer is not spoken from a place of weakness or uncertainty. It is spoken from the seat of victory, with the awareness that the answer is already settled in the heavens. It is not a cry for help, but a declaration that aligns the believer's voice with eternal truth, releasing spiritual power into the atmosphere. When a person truly grasps the authority behind their words, prayer shifts from being a ritual to becoming a force that commands change. The words spoken are not mere sounds, but living declarations that pierce through darkness, uproot impossibilities, and call into existence what was hidden. Throughout history, people who discovered the depth of this kind of prayer experienced radical transformation because they stopped begging for miracles and began walking in the authority that was already given to them. The reason many tried to erase or silence this truth is because it dismantles fear, exposes the enemy's weakness, and empowers ordinary people to operate with extraordinary strength. It threatens systems built on doubt because it teaches that divine power is not locked away somewhere far, but already placed within the heart and mouth of the believer who dares to speak it. Faith is the engine of this kind of prayer. Without faith, words are empty, but with faith, they become unstoppable. It is like striking a match in the darkness. Not only does it bring light, it sets everything combustible aflame. Every word uttered in this prayer carries the weight of heavenly authority, causing unseen forces to respond. It is not about shouting louder or sounding religious. It is about believing deeper. It is the realization that heaven has already signed what you are declaring, and your voice is simply delivering it to the earth. That is why it has always been resisted, not because it is weak, but because it is dangerous to darkness. When one person begins to pray this way, fear loses its grip, sickness bows, chains break, and doors that have been locked for years open without force. Those who understand this truth no longer wait for signs to believe. They believe and signs follow. It is a prayer of dominion, not desperation. And that is what separates it from ordinary words. It brings a shift in the way a person thinks, speaks, and lives. When spoken with full assurance, even the atmosphere around changes because faith-filled declarations invite divine manifestation. What was delayed begins to accelerate, what was hidden begins to surface, and what was broken begins to be restored. This prayer does not need validation from men because it already carries the approval of heaven. And though many forces through generations have tried to suppress its revelation, they failed because truth cannot be erased, only ignored. The time has come for this prayer to rise again in the mouths of those who will not bow to fear but stand firm in faith. It is not about titles, positions, or religious rituals. It is about a bold heart that believes. When this prayer is spoken, the impossible loses its authority, the enemy loses its power, and victory becomes the new reality. This is why those who rediscover it walk differently, speak differently, and live with unshakable confidence. They are no longer moved by circumstances because they know their words carry the echo of heaven. This is the prayer that shakes the unseen realm, and no matter how many tried to erase it, its fire still burns in the hearts of those who dare to speak it with faith. There is a kind of prayer that does not simply rise like smoke into the air, but strikes the atmosphere with authority and certainty. It is not whispered out of fear, nor spoken as a mere routine, but released with the weight of divine truth behind every word. This kind of prayer was never meant to be hidden, yet throughout history, forces both seen and unseen have tried to silence it, bury it, or replace it with empty rituals. It is powerful because it is built on a revelation that the victory has already been secured, and when a person prays from this place of knowing rather than hoping, everything changes. It is not about asking heaven to act, it is about aligning with what heaven has already decided. Those who understand this truth do not speak uncertainly, but declare boldly, knowing that their words carry the sound of victory. Faith is what turns prayer from a request into a decree, and a decree cannot be ignored in the spiritual realm. The reason this truth was resisted and pushed aside was never because it lacked power, but because it gave power to those who believed. It dismantled systems built on fear and dependency, showing people they no longer needed to beg for what was already promised. This prayer exposes the weakness of darkness, because once someone realizes that their words hold the weight of heaven, they no longer bow to circumstances, but make circumstances bow to their faith. It is the kind of prayer that shakes the unseen, that unlocks closed doors, that causes what was hidden to be revealed and what was bound to be loosed. When a person dares to speak with such faith, the spiritual world responds immediately. It is like light breaking through a long and stubborn night, impossible to resist or hold back. The authority behind such a prayer does not come from human strength, but from a divine covenant that cannot be broken. When these words are spoken, they do not travel alone. They carry the backing of heaven. And that is why no force of darkness can stand against them. Those who rediscover this prayer find their lives transformed, not because they became religious experts, but because they learned to believe with unshakable confidence. It is not a loud performance, but a quiet power, a faith that refuses to waver even when the situation looks impossible. It does not beg for light, but commands darkness to flee. This kind of prayer has been silenced in many places because it awakens people to their true identity and authority. But truth cannot be erased. It can only be forgotten for a time, waiting to be revived in the hearts of those who are willing to stand in faith again. And when it returns, everything around begins to shift. Chains break, healing flows, provision comes, peace settles, and strength rises. It is not about asking for permission, but enforcing what has already been given. That is why those who speak this way live differently. They do not depend on emotions, but on promises that cannot fail. Their words carry weight, their prayers carry power, and their faith carries victory. It is this kind of prayer that generations tried to silence, but it still burns like fire in the hearts of those who dare to believe. There is a kind of prayer that carries a fire too strong to be silenced, a force so real that even history bears the marks of those who tried to suppress it but failed. This prayer is not about desperation or fear, but about authority, faith, and divine truth flowing through human words. It is the kind of prayer that does not wait for permission to move mountains, but commands mountains to move because it stands on what has already been accomplished. Throughout time, people who grasped this truth were not ordinary. They were those who understood that heaven responds not to begging, but to believing, not to empty phrases, but to words filled with living faith. This prayer was hidden and resisted because it threatened systems built on fear and powerlessness. It gave strength to ordinary people, reminding them that they did not need to earn what was already given. When such a prayer is spoken, it does not echo in vain. It stirs the unseen realm. It causes what is locked to open. It makes what is broken rise again, and it brings light into the darkest corners of life. Those who tried to erase this prayer did not do so because it was weak, but because it was dangerous to everything that thrives in darkness. When a heart begins to understand the weight behind such words, prayer transforms from ritual into revelation. It is no longer about reciting lines, but about releasing power. This kind of prayer is rooted in certainty, not doubt. It is spoken with the awareness that what is declared is already secured, that what is asked is already answered, and that heaven is not distant, but standing ready to respond. Faith is the anchor that holds this truth steady, and without it, words are empty shells. But with faith, words become living forces, creating shifts in places where human strength could never reach. Those who rediscover this kind of prayer begin to see that they are not powerless, that their voice carries weight, that their declarations are backed by divine authority. It is not about loudness or performance, but about alignment with an unshakable promise. This is why darkness fears it. Because once someone understands their authority, fear loses its grip, circumstances lose their control, and chains begin to fall without resistance. The spiritual world recognizes the difference between words spoken in uncertainty and words spoken in faith. When these words are spoken with confidence, they become unstoppable. And now this prayer is rising again in the hearts of those who are willing to believe. It cannot be hidden any longer because truth cannot stay buried forever. This is the kind of prayer that heals the sick, restores the broken, unlocks destiny, and shakes what once seemed unshakable. It does not plead for help, but enforces what is already settled. It stands boldly against fear, lack, and limitation, declaring that what heaven has spoken cannot be overturned. Those who dare to pray like this begin to live differently. They walk with quiet strength, they speak with unshakable faith, and they face challenges with the calmness of someone who already knows the outcome. Their words carry the weight of divine backing, and that is why nothing can stand against them. Generations may have tried to silence this prayer, but every attempt failed because the power behind it is not human. It is a fire that keeps burning, a truth that keeps rising, a light that keeps breaking through. When a person opens their mouth with this faith, they do not just speak. They release power. They shift reality, and they awaken the authority placed within them since the beginning. That is why this prayer remains unshaken and undefeated, waiting for hearts bold enough to speak it again. There is a kind of prayer that carries a power so profound that even time has not been able to erase its force. It is not ordinary because it was never born from human emotion or fear, but from divine truth and spiritual authority. This prayer has walked through centuries like a quiet fire, igniting hearts that dared to believe and burning away the walls of doubt that tried to contain it. Many systems, voices, and powers have tried to bury it under layers of tradition and fear, but it cannot be buried because what is birthed in divine power can never be silenced by human hands. This prayer is not a cry of helplessness, but a declaration of certainty, the voice of one who knows that the answer is already established. When it is spoken, it does not echo into empty space, but travels with authority, stirring spiritual forces that respond to faith. It is not fragile or uncertain. It is unshakable, unstoppable, and undeniable. Those who understand its depth stop praying like beggars and start praying like heirs of a promise. That is why throughout history this prayer was resisted. Not because it was powerless, but because it is too powerful to be controlled. The moment a heart awakens to the truth behind this kind of prayer, everything begins to shift. Prayer stops being a routine act and becomes a living encounter between divine power and human faith. It is not about rehearsed lines or religious performances. It is about the weight of faith being released into the atmosphere through words that align with heaven. Faith is the foundation that turns words into weapons, declarations into movements, and simple prayers into unstoppable forces. When faith and authority meet, chains break, walls crumble, and impossibilities begin to bow. This prayer does not try to convince heaven, it aligns with heaven. It does not wait for approval. It enforces what is already written. That is why darkness fears it, because once someone learns to pray like this, fear loses its grip, doubt loses its voice, and hopelessness fades away. This kind of prayer teaches that divine power is not far away. It lives within and flows through those who believe. When a person begins to walk in this understanding, their words carry a new weight. They no longer pray with uncertainty, hoping something will change. They speak with conviction, knowing something already has changed. Their voice becomes a channel through which heaven touches earth. When this kind of prayer is released, it does not depend on feelings or appearances. It stands on the certainty of divine truth. It carries quiet authority, not because of who is speaking, but because of the power backing the words. Those who tried to silence this prayer feared what happens when ordinary people discover their extraordinary authority. They feared a generation rising up to declare what cannot be denied, a people who would stop waiting for permission and start walking in their promise. But truth cannot be erased, only forgotten for a season. And when it returns to hearts that are ready, it moves with even greater force than before. This prayer is returning to lips that refuse to bow to fear. It is rising again in the hearts of those who know they were never meant to live powerless. It is not about being louder than the storm. It is about carrying the calm strength that commands the storm to cease. It does not chase after miracles. It declares the ground on which miracles manifest. This prayer heals the sick, restores the broken, brings peace to the restless, and shakes every foundation built on fear. It carries the unchanging authority of divine promise, and when spoken with faith, it releases waves of power that cannot be stopped. Generations tried to erase it, but it endured. Forces tried to bury it, but it rose again. It is alive in every person who dares to speak with faith, who refuses to let fear dictate their words, who knows that their voice carries the echo of something greater. This prayer does not belong to the past. It belongs to anyone who believes. It is a reminder that faith still moves mountains, that authority still silences darkness, and that truth cannot be erased. There is a type of prayer whose power cannot be measured by human standards, a prayer so potent that it has always commanded attention from the spiritual realm. It is not born of hesitation or weakness, nor does it depend on circumstance or emotion. Its strength lies in the authority behind it and the faith with which it is spoken. Throughout history, there have been countless attempts to suppress it, to push it aside, and to replace it with empty words that carry no weight. Yet every effort to erase it has failed because what comes from divine authority cannot be destroyed by human hands. This prayer is different from ordinary prayers because it is not seeking something new to be given. Rather, it is speaking to release what has already been established in heaven. When it is released, it shakes the unseen, opens doors that have been locked for years, and causes situations that seem impossible to bow before its influence. Those who encounter the power of this prayer discover that their voice is no longer limited. It becomes a conduit through which God's promises are activated, a voice that brings reality into alignment with divine truth. It is not a matter of louder words or more forceful expressions, but of understanding and exercising the spiritual authority that has been granted to every believer. The true essence of this prayer lies in faith, which is its engine and its fuel. Without faith, words are empty. They have no power to stir change. But when faith accompanies the prayer, it becomes a declaration that cannot be ignored by the spiritual forces that govern life's circumstances. It is not pleading, negotiating, or attempting to convince God. It is declaring what has already been decreed and established in heaven. This prayer transforms the one who prays it, shifting their perspective from helplessness to authority, from uncertainty to boldness. Those who begin to understand and embrace this power stop living in fear and begin to operate from a place of victory. They learn that their words, when aligned with divine promise, have the capacity to heal, restore, deliver, and release blessing. It is this understanding that sets apart those whose lives are marked by extraordinary breakthroughs from those who continue to struggle under limitations. The prayer awakens a realization that human effort alone is insufficient, but when combined with faith and the authority given by God, it becomes a force that nothing can resist. When this prayer is spoken, it commands attention and causes a shift in the spiritual atmosphere. The unseen world responds to faith-filled declarations, moving on behalf of the one who speaks them. Darkness cannot stand against words backed by heavenly authority, and every attempt to hinder or block their manifestation is rendered powerless. This is why, throughout history, efforts were made to erase it, suppress it, or replace it with powerless substitutes. Ordinary words cannot accomplish what this prayer accomplishes because it is rooted not in human logic or reasoning, but in the certainty of divine truth. It is a prayer that teaches that authority has been placed in the hands of the believer and that heaven will respond when it is exercised. It restores confidence to those who have been discouraged, strengthens those who have been weakened, and encourages those who have been silenced. It reminds the believer that faith is not a passive hope, but an active declaration of what is already secured in the realm of the Spirit. The transformative power of this prayer is seen not only in external circumstances, but also within the life of the one who prays it. It changes the way they speak, think, and act. Words begin to carry weight. Faith becomes unshakable. Fear loses its power. This prayer teaches that the believer is not merely a participant in life, but a co-laborer with God, carrying authority to influence situations, heal brokenness, and release blessing. The reason this prayer has been opposed and resisted is because it empowers people to rise above limitations, exposing the weakness of fear, doubt, and darkness. Once a person begins to pray in this way, they understand that they are not dependent on external circumstances to determine their success or failure. They begin to operate in a dimension where spiritual authority and faith intersect, where divine promises move from the unseen into tangible reality. This is why it has survived attempts to erase it. why it has endured despite opposition, and why it continues to impact lives in ways that are undeniable. Now, this prayer is being rediscovered and embraced once more by those who are ready to walk in authority and faith. It is rising again in the hearts of those who refuse to bow to fear or uncertainty. It does not plead for life to change. It commands life to align with the promises of God. It brings restoration to the broken, healing to the sick, provision to the needy, and victory to the weary. It is a declaration that what heaven has established cannot be overturned, a reminder that divine authority lives in every believer who chooses to speak with faith. Those who speak this prayer walk differently, act differently, and live differently because they know the power behind their words. Generations may have attempted to erase it, but its influence persists, alive and potent in every believer willing to understand and release it. It is not a relic of the past. It is a living force that continues to shape reality, and it will continue to do so as long as there are hearts ready to believe and mouths willing to declare it. There is a prayer whose impact cannot be measured by ordinary standards, a prayer whose power reaches far beyond what the human eye can see. It is not dependent on emotion, circumstance, or personal ability. Its strength is found in the authority it carries and the faith with which it is released. Throughout history, many have attempted to diminish its influence, to suppress it, and even to erase it entirely. Yet all such efforts have failed because what is birthed in divine power cannot be silenced by human hands. This prayer is unique because it is not a cry for assistance, but a declaration of truth, a release of authority that has already been granted from the heavens. When spoken, it penetrates the spiritual atmosphere, causing forces that govern life's situations to respond immediately. Ordinary words may fade or be forgotten, but the words of this prayer are living, active, and unstoppable, capable of unlocking doors that have remained closed for years, reversing situations that seemed immovable, and bringing life to areas that were previously dead or stagnant. Those who understand its depth realize that they are not powerless participants in life, but co-laborers with God, equipped with the authority to speak heaven's promises into the world and see them manifested. The core of this prayer is faith, which acts as the fuel and engine that propels its power. Without faith, words are empty and powerless. With faith, they become unstoppable forces that move mountains and break chains. This is not a prayer that seeks permission or negotiates with circumstances. It declares what heaven has already determined. Those who practice it shift from a mindset of helplessness to one of authority, understanding that their voice can influence outcomes in ways that human effort alone cannot. As faith grows, doubt diminishes, fear loses its grip, and hope becomes a living reality. Speaking this prayer requires more than repetition. It demands belief, confidence, and the knowledge that what is declared aligns perfectly with divine truth. Those who have embraced it learn to speak boldly, knowing that every word carries heavenly weight, and that the spiritual realm responds immediately to declarations spoken in alignment with God's promises. When released, this prayer causes profound changes not only in circumstances, but also within the life of the one who prays it. It transforms perspective, bringing clarity, peace, and confidence where there was uncertainty, fear, and confusion. Those who pray in this way begin to see life differently. They no longer view challenges as insurmountable obstacles, but as opportunities for authority and faith to operate. Darkness loses its power, limitation is forced to retreat, and the impossible begins to bend under the weight of divine authority. The reason it has been suppressed throughout history is simple. It empowers ordinary people to rise above limitations and claim the inheritance of authority already granted to them. It disrupts fear, nullifies doubt, and exposes weakness in every area where it is released. Once embraced, it cannot be ignored, and its effects continue to ripple outward, affecting not only the individual, but also those around them. This prayer is not dependent on human circumstances or appearances. It does not ask for life to change. It declares that life will conform to divine principles and promises. Every word spoken with faith carries authority that cannot be resisted by the spiritual forces that oppose it. Those who understand its power walk with a new confidence, speak with renewed boldness, and act with an assurance that comes from knowing they are standing on what heaven has already established. It changes behavior, mindset, and expectations because it reminds the believer that divine authority lives within them and that heaven responds when this authority is exercised. Fear, doubt, and limitation lose their power over anyone who dares to pray in this way. And what was once impossible becomes inevitable as the prayer accomplishes its intended purpose. The revival of this prayer in the lives of believers today is significant because it signals a return to understanding the authority and power placed in human hands through divine provision. It teaches that the believer is not helpless, that spiritual authority is not theoretical, and that faith is not passive but active, able to command outcomes and bring transformation. Those who speak this prayer see lives healed, destinies restored, and blessings released that had been delayed or obscured. Its power is not determined by human skill or eloquence, but by alignment with divine truth and unwavering confidence in the promises of heaven. This is why, despite attempts to erase it, it persists, surviving through generations and continuing to impact lives in profound ways. Now, this prayer is rising in the hearts of those who are ready to embrace it fully, to speak it boldly, and to operate in the authority they have been given. It is not a relic of the past, but a living, active force that continues to shape reality. When spoken in faith, it releases healing, provision, deliverance, and restoration, demonstrating that what heaven has established cannot be overturned by human opposition. Those who pray in this way walk differently, think differently, and act differently because they know their words carry divine authority. Generations may have tried to suppress it, but its power endures alive and potent in the lives of those who are willing to believe, declare, and release it into the world. It is a reminder that faith, when exercised with understanding and authority, is not passive. It is a force that changes situations, transforms lives, and manifests what heaven has already promised. There exists a prayer whose power transcends human understanding, a prayer so strong that it has never relied on emotion, circumstance, or human ability for its effectiveness. Its strength comes from the authority and divine truth that back every word spoken, making it a force that cannot be erased, silenced, or diminished by any human effort. Throughout history, many have tried to suppress this prayer, attempting to replace it with empty words or to hide it beneath layers of misunderstanding and fear. Yet all such attempts failed because what is birthed in divine power cannot be destroyed by human hands. This prayer is not a plea for help, nor is it a request made from weakness. It is a declaration of the victory and authority that have already been established in the spiritual realm. When released, it moves unseen forces, changes circumstances that seemed immovable, opens doors that were long closed, and brings life where there was once stagnation or despair. Ordinary words may vanish or be forgotten, but the words of this prayer are living, dynamic, and unstoppable, capable of unlocking blessings, restoring hope, and shifting realities in ways that human effort alone could never accomplish. Those who grasp its depth realize that they are not powerless participants in life, but co-laborers with the divine, entrusted with the authority to speak heaven's promises into the world and see them manifest. Faith is the driving force behind this prayer, the engine that propels its power into action. Without faith, the words spoken are empty and ineffective. With faith, They become living declarations that move mountains, break chains, and shift the course of events. This prayer does not seek permission from heaven. It aligns with what has already been decreed. It transforms the one who prays it, shifting their mindset from helplessness to authority, from uncertainty to confidence, and from passivity to action. Those who understand it learn that their voice can influence outcomes in ways human effort alone cannot, and they discover that faith-filled declarations can heal, restore, deliver, and release blessings. Speaking this prayer requires more than repetition. It demands belief, courage, and an unwavering trust in divine truth. Words spoken with this level of faith carry weight, and the spiritual realm responds immediately to them. Darkness, fear, doubt, and limitation cannot stand against declarations rooted in such faith because they carry the authority of heaven itself. The power of this prayer is not limited to external circumstances. It transforms the person who prays it. It changes perspective, instills confidence, brings peace where there was fear, and transforms uncertainty into steadfast assurance. Those who speak it begin to walk differently, act differently, and respond to challenges differently because they understand that they are not powerless. They realize that their words are not idle sounds, but active instruments that release spiritual authority into the world. This is why it has been suppressed and opposed throughout history. It empowers ordinary people to rise above limitations, exposes fear and doubt, and restores confidence to the believer. Once embraced, it becomes a driving force that cannot be ignored, rippling outward to impact not just the individual, but everyone and everything around them. Those who learn to pray in this way experience a shift in their entire reality, as what was once impossible becomes inevitable through the exercise of faith and authority. This prayer does not depend on human perception or circumstance for its effectiveness. It does not request life to change. It commands life to align with divine principles. Every word spoken in faith carries authority that cannot be resisted in the spiritual realm. Those who pray it gain a confidence that is unshakable, an assurance that allows them to act boldly and decisively, knowing that what they declare aligns with what heaven has already established. This understanding brings a sense of peace and security because the believer no longer relies on external conditions to determine their outcomes. Instead, they operate from a position of spiritual authority, knowing that divine promises will manifest when spoken with faith. This is why attempts to suppress the prayer have failed repeatedly. Its power does not come from human skill or knowledge, but from the alignment of the believer with divine authority. The revival of this prayer in contemporary times is significant, signaling a return to the understanding of the authority granted to believers. It demonstrates that ordinary people can exercise extraordinary power when they release words in alignment with faith and divine truth. Those who embrace it experience healing, restoration, provision, and breakthrough in ways that were once thought impossible. Its effectiveness is not determined by human ability or eloquence, but by the confidence and alignment with which it is spoken. Despite centuries of opposition and attempts to erase it, the prayer endures, surviving through generations and continuing to impact lives profoundly. It is a reminder that spiritual authority cannot be denied, that faith is an active force, and that what heaven has established will always prevail when exercised with confidence. Today, this prayer is rising once more in the hearts of those who are willing to speak with courage and authority. It is not a relic of the past, but a living, active force that continues to shape reality and bring about change. When spoken with faith, it releases healing to the sick, provision to the needy, deliverance to the oppressed, and restoration to the broken. It is a declaration of what has already been established in heaven, a reminder that divine authority resides in every believer, and a call to act boldly in the confidence of that authority. Those who embrace it live differently, speak differently, and act differently because they understand the power behind their words. It is unstoppable, unshakable, and undeniable. And it continues to demonstrate that faith exercised in alignment with divine authority has the capacity to change everything. This prayer is eternal in its power because it flows directly from heaven, carried not by human effort, but by divine authority. Its influence cannot be erased, diminished, or ignored because it aligns with the will and promises of God. Every time it is spoken in faith, it brings life, healing, provision, and transformation into the world. It awakens ordinary people to extraordinary potential, teaches them to operate from authority rather than fear, and empowers them to influence circumstances in ways that would otherwise seem impossible. Generations may have tried to suppress it, yet it endures, alive in the hearts of those who dare to believe and release it with boldness. This is the prayer that shapes destinies, restores hope, and manifests the promises of heaven on earth. And it will continue to do so wherever faith and authority intersect.